Hello there. Greetings. Today, I want to visit some Bible stories and see how they relate to some of the actions and activities that we see commonly in today's world. As a book, the Bible basically is a document that contains things as it relates to God and the things as it relates to God's arch rival. And if we think for a moment about what the Bible teaches about God and the setting in which He dwells, the Bible teaches that there is an abode called heaven where God resides. And He also resides there with a hierarchical structure that they use to accomplish their purposes. That's according to the Bible. For example, we learn in the Bible that God is boss, He presides. We also learn of a right hand man. It is believed that that right hand person is the one who later became Jesus. We learn about archangels like Michael. We learn about Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel. These are all powerful ones in the hierarchical structure. Then we hear about seraphs and cherubs. So there is a structure there in that realm according to the Bible. Now, whatever the situation was there, it's difficult for those who inhabit earth to know, and especially so since we depend on the Bible for understanding or information about that side. But the Bible says that there were some disagreement that took place in that realm. And from within the hierarchical structure, there was a dissident. There was a breaking away. There was an apostatizing. And that is how Satan is said to come into existence. And obviously, he did not decide to be an ex good, whether he was an angel or whatever he was. He did not decide to just be an ex one and that's it. He decided that he would try to cultivate among others there his views so that they could see why he decided to take the course of action that he took. The population of angels in the heavens is not disclosed in the Bible. There's nowhere in the Bible that you can read to know how many angels are in heaven. However, the prophet Daniel gives an indication that the population there is not small, because in one portion of the book of Daniel, he spoke of 1,000,000 angels, that is 1,000,000, And in the subsequent verse, he spoke of 10,000 times 10,000 angels. That's 100 million. So just from that, we can account for, according to the book, 101 million angels. But then just think of it. In the Revelations, we are told that when Satan was expelled, when he was thrown out, that he managed to convince a third to follow him. Now, if we were to look at a third of 101 million, then we already have something like 33 million plus. And that wasn't basically all there was according to the theological thesis. There are far more angels than that. But just suffice it to say, we could account for 33 million dissidents or 33 million ex good angels. And they now join the rank of the one who is the arch rival to the arrangement that existed in heaven. Now we take it on the surface that whatever happens in heaven is perfect. And whatever God does is perfect. And no one should want to disagree with it or find fault with it. But the reality is, it's not so. Fault was found with it, and there were sufficient reasonings to convince some 33 plus million that something is not right. And so they would call themselves ex good angels. And I am saying this because, social media, the various social media platforms are inundated with ex religious people from this group, that group. And every group in the world have their dissidents. I recall some years ago, there was a Islamic scholar from the Persian Gulf that, exiled himself in England after critiquing the Islamic faith. And many of us remember the book written by Salman Rushdie called The Satanic Verses. And to this day, he has to be living in hiding because the Islamic community felt that he blasphemed Islam. And so every religious group have their dissidents. And dissidents are never treated in a friendly way. So when Satan became a dissident, we know the Bible said he was cast out. He was not allowed to stay. He did his campaigning, whatever his activities were called, and he got other dissidents with him, large numbers. So when you see on social media platforms, for example, the many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who are trying to gaslight the organization, many of whom were elders who would have spent much of their life helping to build the same organization they're now trying to tear down. It's quite reminiscent of that situation where you have those dissidents among God and his hierarchical structure. They found fault with it, and so they decide they walk away from it. So it's not quite a new thing. You have a gentleman on YouTube, for example, Mr. Lyde Evans from the bunker, he said. And this gentleman who traveled the world to find ex witnesses to help him to gaslight as much as he can the faith. And you have another gentleman who had the rare privilege of serving in Bethel, Mr. JT. He and his wife, having walked away from the faith, will now seek to use their social media platform to dissuade as many. You have other ex-witnesses group like the Covert Faith. You have the JWS survey. And of course, perhaps to top it off, you would have had a member of the governing body himself, Raymond France, who also left the hierarchical structure of the organization, the governing body, and did just like what those other fellows did up on high, according to the Bible. They became dissidents. And rest assured that when Satan and the angels that followed him, when they decide to deflect, when they decide to apostatize, their intentions were never to promote the interest of what they left behind. You know, they now have a new agenda. And it was very obvious, if we follow the Bible, how the agenda was playing out, because we know what happened, according to the Bible, to Adam and Eve. That in a very subtle way, the couple there were misled into a course of action that result in their deflection as well. And when I think about them, I can, identify their situation with that of JT, who his program is critical thinking. And he's encouraging the witnesses left behind to become critical thinkers. They must think critically, ask the hard questions. And that was just what Satan did in Eden, encourage Eve to think critically to her demise. You know, so this idea of critical independent thinking, while it sounds encouraging, there's a gray side to it. There's a gray side to it. It means that what you're told can't be so. So you need to overthink it. You need to think it critically. Well, Eve did. And according to the book, we know the result. But then also, there were, according to the theological thesis, times when angels found it necessary to materialize bodies like we have and interbreed with human female. And so in the account of Genesis, we learn about the Nephilims, or the fellers, human creatures that were literally a hybrid offspring that were just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Some portions of history said it's not unusual to see people 9 feet. So some of those dissidents obviously may have felt that it wasn't right that human beings have the right to marry and to bear children, and they did not have it. And that conclusion can be drawn from the fact that they choose to come and marry women and to raise offspring. History says that those offspring were perished in the flood. So to have dissidents is not a new thing. It's not a new thing. So when I see the plethora of views coming out of these ex-JWs camp, it reminds me pretty much of that situation of heavenly dissidents. When you think that men who serves at the highest level of the organization find it necessary to deflect, there are some persons who will say it is proof that the organization is no good. But then it begs the question, the fact that Satan and millions of angels deflected, are we to conclude that it means heaven is no good? Or should we look at it and see that there is a danger to critical thinking, a danger to independent thinking, you know? And when you think about some of the things that these guys are promoting, you have to question their motive. It reminds me of the blissful situation called marriage. That if you ever observe two people getting married, it looks real blissful, harmonious, romantic. But ever so often, that lovely romantic love relationship end up in bitterness, anger, heartache, divorce. And in today's world, when there are divorce cases, sometimes they can be extreme because it leaves some people in a bankrupt state. It is not unusual in some countries for a man who is married to lose his house that has great value to his wife and children, and he's left out in the cold to start life all over again. Can you imagine the bitterness that he will feel? I have never met a person who that has happened to and they're happy. Never met one. So it is obvious that the love affair between some Jehovah's Witnesses and the organization turns sour. It spoils. And so it's like there was a divorcing. Somebody is thrown out, somebody is expelled. And so obviously there is hurt, there is anger. I listened to a former elder and presiding overseer in Canada, although most of his work was done in the United States. And when he fell out of grace with the organization, he nearly died, he said. You know, the condition of his heart deteriorated so badly because of his inability to deal with the extreme disciplinary uh, action meted out to him. And it's understandable. It's understandable. There is hurt, there is anger, there is bitterness, you know. But of course, there are scores of those who have been disciplined who choose to return. They feel more or less that, like Peter said to Jesus when Jesus asked the disciples if they didn't want to go as well. And Peter said, Lord, where should we go? You have sayings of everlasting life. So there are some Jehovah's Witnesses who feel that way and they return to the fold. But there are some who are so eaten up with anger and hate and maliciousness and divisiveness that they feel the best thing to do is to gaslight the organization that once made them. You know, a person who is exposed to the faith and decide not to embrace it, you can understand. But those who choose to embrace it, they would have learned every nitty gritty, everything about it. There's nothing hidden from them. So the fact that they choose to embrace it, they choose to utilize so much of their time to teach it. Now that they are divorced and they're bitter and they're angry, you feel they don't have any excuse. And I have seen where some persons criticize the requirement for, you know, time spent in the ministry. But look at the amount of time these same persons are spending recording videos, trying to convince and to gaslight. It's a lot of time. And just as how you feel passionate to express why you are an ex witness, why shouldn't those who remain there feel just as passionate or even more to share their view as to why they like it and want to be there? So I certainly would want to say to all of those who are ex witnesses, what is it that you have to offer? To spend hours and hours and hours and hours and years and years and years critiquing and criticizing without putting forward something better, it doesn't make sense. What is it that the covert faith is offering? What is it that JWS survey is offering? What is it that Mr. Evans from the bunker is offering? All these guys do is critique, 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 and criticize and criticize and criticize, but they're not offering anything that is better. They're not offering anything at all, you know. And you would feel that if you're dissuading somebody from something, you should be offering them something better. I've heard some persons criticize the fact that, when they were witnesses, they could not celebrate birthdays, Easter, and Christmas. But they just need to understand that those things were not a big part of human life all the time. For example, I've often said that those persons who seriously want to follow the Bible and to follow the Christian pathway, the book of Acts clearly state how you should do your thing. And there is no mention there where the people who followed Jesus celebrated Jesus' birthday. They would have known exactly when he was born. They choose not to talk about it in the Bible. So how big a deal is Christmas? The way Easter is celebrated today is totally different from what was done in the scriptures. How big a deal is that? Jesus told his disciples that they were to be no part of the world. And the word world in the Bible speaks directly to something. Because when he speaks about the world, he obviously speaks about that part of the universe that is controlled by Satan. Satan rules that part. And so if you decide that you want to leave an arrangement, then you have to ask yourself, are you now gone to the world that you should be no part of? Are you now choosing to go to the world that, Satan effectively rules? Where anything goes? What is the code of discipline that you're advocating that people should follow? What's the code of ethics? Is it a free-for-all world where people are allowed to do as they please? No rules, no guidelines? And if there are, what are they? So certainly I want to say to all those ex-JWs, think about your motive. What is the motive? What's the plan? What's the game plan? Just to gaslight the organization? What's a better alternative? I would like some feedback on this one, as I've gotten feedback on others too. So thank you for listening. Give me your feedback. And I want to say to you, critical thinking have consequences. Being an X this and an X that also have consequences. Because it's not a new thing. It has always been happening. So turn the eyes inwards and do some critical thinking. Until the next time, so long.